Hey, this is Emily Soderback of Scarecrow Video's Viva Physical Media.
Hi, this is Matt Lynch, co-host of Viva. The Projection Booth podcast is sponsored by Scarecrow.
Try out Scarecrow Video's rent-by-mail service. Choose from over 155,000 films and get Blu-rays, 4Ks, and DVDs, all delivered directly to your door.
Visit scarecrowvideo.org today.
Hold your ears, folks. It's showtime.
People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
These men are heroes for hire. Violence is their specialty. They are paid to be brave and brutal.
Is it true you mercenaries will do anything for money?
What are you talking about?
We're going to pick up $50 million worth of diamonds.
Who said anything about giving you hand?
Well, I may go, I may stay.
Hey, you want to come?
I'll be there.
Right!
These men are mercenaries. Brave, brutal. The best in the business. War is their profession. Danger is their specialty. $50 million in diamonds is their mission.
A deal, Captain. 3 days. To keep the Congo alive.
Danger is their 9-to-5 job. And there's nothing more dangerous than diamonds.
The diamonds, where are they? Where are they?
Don't kill him!
Kill him, I'm gonna cut Henlein's head off! Get it off of me! Get it off of me! Come on! Hurry, we need it! Take it easy, will you?
You're kind of dangerous, aren't you?
I came down out of the trees by invitation, and I'll kill anybody who tries to send me back up again.
Violence in the tempting beauty of a woman.
Where were you? We waited for you! We waited for you!
Violence in guns and bare hands of hired heroes. A strike force of crack mercenaries fights the hottest battles in all the blazing hell of today's strife-torn Congo. Dark of the sun.
Welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Join me once again is Mr. Andrew Nette.
Don't cross swords with me, Curry.
Also back in the booth is Mr. Jedidiah Ayres.
Put the swastika back on. You've earned it.
This one is a request we've had from Andrew Nette himself for the last few years, finally getting to it. On this episode, we are looking at the 1968 film from director Jack Cardiff, based on Wilbur Smith's novel, Dark of the Sun. The film stars Rod Taylor as Bruce Curry and Jim Brown as Ruffo, two mercenaries who come to the Congo in 1964 where they're hired to retrieve a cache of diamonds and get them back to the new government. They put together a small team, including a Nazi and a drunk doctor, before taking off by train to parts unknown to get the diamonds and save a group of white people from the dangerous Simba tribesmen. We will be spoiling this film as much as we can as we move forward, so if you don't want anything ruined, please turn off the podcast, track down the movie, watch the movie, and then come on back, turn the podcast back on, and listen. That's so simple. So, Andrew, when was the first time you saw this film, and what did you think?
I'm so excited to be talking about this film. And yes, I have been nagging you for, I think, 2 or 3 years to do an episode on this film. So it's great to be doing that. I'm sure I would have seen this film on a Sunday night back in the late 70s or early 80s with my parents. Sunday night movie was a big deal back in the 70s and the 80s, and it's how I got exposed to many amazing films and films that were probably completely inappropriate for my age. And one of these was Dark of the Sun. I've lost track of how many times I've seen it. I see a lot of people online, including Martin Scorsese, talk about this film as a guilty pleasure. But I love this film. I think it's a great film, and I don't feel guilty about that at all. I don't believe in guilty pleasures when it comes to movie watching. It all works for me. It's got a great cast. It's got a great score. It's a great, gritty war film that doesn't have an ounce of fat on the entire narrative. It's still, I think, got the only chainsaw fight I've ever seen in a film. It's beautifully shot. It's a great men on a mission film, but I would also argue that in its own way, it's also very political, and it interrogates everything from the ethics of being a mercenary to the nature of global imperialism in Africa. I love Rod Taylor. I just love the whole film. It's a great film, and I'm really looking forward to talking about it.
And Jed, how about yourself?
I'm sure that it was at the urging of Andrew that I watched this film a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. As soon as I saw the poster for the film, for Andrew Nette to recommend the film, but when I saw the poster, I was like, I have to see this movie. The poster was incredible. The chainsaws, the explosions, I love the style of it. And I do Men on a Mission films. I really love Where Eagles Dare and Dirty Dozen and Play Dirty and things like that. This really does fit in right at the top tier of these types of movies. Once I saw it, it was one of those rare times when you see a piece of pulp art advertising a book or a film, and the product absolutely lives up to the artwork, which is very rare. But it's great artwork, and it's a really wild, violent, dark, but also a moving film. So I've watched it several times since, most of those preparing for this podcast, but sometimes I watch films several times preparing for a podcast, and I like the film less by the time we do an episode, but that's not the case with this one. I really do think this film is firing on all cylinders, and deserves to be championed. Thanks, Andrew, for getting me to watch it.
And that poster, we should add that poster art by the great Frank McCarthy is a stunning, who did a lot of posters in the 1960s and 1970s, I think. A stunning poster, though, all those people on top of the train barreling into oblivion with explosions and jets and chainsaws and all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, I had never even heard of this film until you brought it up, Andrew. And like you, Jedidiah, the more I think about this film, the more I've watched this film, the more I like this film. And I agree with you, Andrew, not a ounce of fat on this movie. And the more I think about it, the more they did a great job when it comes to the adaptation of the Wilbur Smith book. I think it starts to differ quite a bit in the third act, but otherwise, I think that Quentin Quarty, he does a great job. One of my favorite writers. Think about him all the time whenever I use my keyboard. Randall McDougall as Quentin Quarty. I think he was maybe mad at some of the rewrites of some of the things that were going on, possibly more of the Rod Taylor stuff, because I think Taylor has been on record saying that he helped write the screenplay for this. And when an actor comes in and says, I wrote the screenplay, that's never a good sign. I don't know what role Adrian Spies played as far as the screenplay, but I think that it really captures a lot of the better action scenes of the book. They do a really good job of featuring a lot of great set pieces. The makeup of the team is different than it is in the book, and obviously the setting of it is a little bit different as well, though you wouldn't necessarily know because it's still Africa, it's still the Congo, the movie is set in more 64, 65, whereas the book I think is set more 60, 61, and by that time in Congo, things had already shifted around as far as the political affiliations and things, and this really gets into the movie. Like you said, it's more of a heist film when it comes to there being the diamonds at the center of this. The diamonds are there in the book, but it feels like they're almost secondary to saving of people, whereas this one is much more cutthroat when it comes to, yeah, there's diamonds. We're going to go get these diamonds, and maybe we'll save some white people along the way.
Yeah, it's a very cynical picture. I do think there's such a thing as cynical romanticism, and I think this kind of fits that. I am enamored of understanding I'm being cynical in the way I view a situation and still participate in the adventure of it. So it got me there. Yeah, it's gross that the real motivation here that everybody acknowledges is we're going for diamonds, but we got to have the cover of we're going on a rescue mission to save some lives that are going to be lost if we don't go rescue these people. But yeah, as Rod Taylor's Curry asks at the very beginning, he's being hired to take a train to a remote town and pull out the settlers there and bring them back to safety before rebel forces come in and kill everybody. And he's like, why are we going to this town? There's so many towns. We could go to a dozen towns. Why this one? And it's because there's $150 million worth of diamonds that we're going to collect from this vault.
They set 2 clocks in this movie. There's we need to get these diamonds back in 3 days. And then there's also, once they get to the town to, Fort Reprieve, there's a time lock safe, which has been set, and there's another 3 hours. So it's like, okay, now you have to wait 3 hours in this town before you can leave with the diamonds and get the hell out of there. As I'm watching this, I kept thinking, it helps that the opening of this movie is, for me, set up a lot like a spaghetti western. Like the animated credits that we have really remind me of like the Leone films, the Dollars trilogy when it comes to the way that these credits are running. The music by Jacques Lussier is very Morricone to me, to the point where Tarantino used it on the Inglourious Basterds soundtrack, and he was very much about recycling other people's scores for his own movie. He still is, but that was like his thing, especially in Inglourious Basterds. I remember getting into fights with people who thought that was all written for his movie. I'm like, child, please pay attention. This is not, it even says theme from Dark of the Sun in here. There's this idea of the people at we'll call it a fort, and the Indians are massing outside, and now it's time for the cavalry to come in and rescue these people and get out. So I really felt like this whole Western idea was going on here, and we're just transplanting it into Africa, and it becomes this more like men's adventure type story where it's still the same idea as we need to save these people from these savages, and this whole idea of the savage group of Simba that are coming, and you hear it's more in the book, I think, the whole idea of the drums and the drums always happening. But my God, these guys, these Simba warriors are just, I've seen pictures of them and they do dress like this. I thought for sure it was all 100% made up for the movie because they look like they're going to fight the warriors if the warriors happen to come into their territory. If they walk through Harlem, the Simba would be the group that attacks them.
If you read the comments, which is always a bad idea actually, but if you read the sort of reviews and the comments on things like Letterboxd about this film, there's a lot of US grad students who've done post-colonialism studies and who are quite happy to bag this film out, and I think that there's maybe a bit of basis to that. One of the things that fascinates me about this film is just how closely based on reality aspects of it is. It's prosaic things, like you say. If you actually look up pictures of the Simbas on the internet, they actually look like they do. I've actually seen pictures of mercenary trains going through the Congo, and they look exactly like this mercenary train. The setting of the film is quite somewhat accurate. It's basically the Congo in the 1960s. Congo's first post-independence leader, Patrice Lumumba, has been killed by Belgian mercenaries who are working with the man who would go on to have an incredibly corrupt Western-backed 32-year rule of the Congo, a guy named Joseph Mobutu. Mobutu kills Patrice Lumumba. The Americans wanted to kill him. Dwight Eisenhower had authorized his elimination in 1960 as a quote-unquote Soviet stooge, but Mobutu got to him before the Americans could. And then after the killing of Lumumba, basically there's an uprising in the part of the Congo that Lumumba came from, a Tasimba rebellion led by followers of Lumumba and it goes from about 1963 to 1965, incredibly violent. And it's put down with the use of foreign mercenaries that Mobutu basically pays to put down the Simbas. Yeah, an enormous amount of there's a lot of realism, and the characters. I think we could talk about the fact that Curry is based on a character called Mad Mike Hoare, who is an actual real life British mercenary who worked in the Congo, a Christian and a rabid anti-communist, led a group of commandos, a group of mercenaries called Five Commando, who had a reputation for looting and not taking prisoners. He's also the only mercenary trained as a accountant and a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants for England and Wales. And also the other character that is based on reality is the character of Henlein, who's played by German actor Peter Karsten, and he's modelled on a real-life Iron Cross-wearing German World War II veteran who was a mercenary in the Congo for a while called Siegfried Müller. I haven't watched, and there's a East German film about Müller called The Smiling Man: Confessions of a Murderer, which I haven't watched for a while now, but you watched it, I think, a bit more recently, Mike.
Yeah, I watched that one last night, as well as a one called Commando 52, which the two films really go well together because the Commando movie is more about the entire group of these guys that Müller brought together and the different specialists that they had. The one guy who loved cooking skulls, and they had human skulls all over the place. And of course, Müller's just like, oh yeah, this guy gave me a skull and I was using it as a flower pot. And I'm just like, oh my God, these are human skulls that you guys are dealing with. And of course, he's trying to be like, oh yeah, no, these were all just, we found these skulls. It's amazing how quickly the bodies decompose over there. And meanwhile, there's interviews where it's like, no, he would take the heads and boil off the skin and the flesh and everything. And there's a whole part in the book about collecting ears, which really then reminds me of Vietnam. And this is taking place while Vietnam is happening, both the real conflict and the filmed version of it, because Vietnam went on for so long. And I really started to see a lot of parallels. This seems like it's the fun version of Vietnam. Oh, we're a bunch of adventurers and we're all going to come to Africa and we're going to make money and we're going to save the white people and all these things, as opposed to the quote unquote dirty war of Vietnam, where it's just, no, we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to make movies about that. We will make movies about how fun Africa was, though.
I'll admit that the real context was something I looked up and got into a little bit afterward. I was purely here for the pulp men's adventure. And I'll admit, when I was young, some of my earliest really profound film impressions were from similar sorts of Bojest with Gary Cooper. It was a hugely influential movie on me. Just the guys in the fort just being swarmed by the dark hordes who were coming to overthrow them, and there was no help coming. Or Zulu, and especially Zulu Dawn. I didn't even see the films, but I saw ads for them on TV, and just British soldiers out in the open. They're not even in a fort. They're just out in the open being just mowed down by the other armies. But just like these little snippets were so terrifying to me as a kid that, yes, something pretty primal that I'll admit I definitely responded to and is tapped into here in Dark of the Sun. But fascinating to learn after watching it about the close mirrored reality of it, apart from enjoying the pure adventure film aspects.
Yeah, I don't think we need to bake the cake too long here. It is a great adventure war film, so, and I'm quite happy to have it as that. But I think it's also, the background to it is fascinating, and I think it's, in addition to that specific Congo background, it's also a sort of real throwback to that era. Mercenaries, we still have mercenaries now, but of course they're these people who operate these massive multinational conglomerates now, and they're into high-tech surveillance, and they have HR policies and all that kind of thing now. Whereas back in the day, back in the 60s, mercenaries seemed to be much less of an organized thing, and much more of a, people would just go off and try their hand at being a mercenary. I can remember when I was young in newsagents looking at that magazine Soldier of Fortune, which was, even then, struck me as the most outrageously right-wing rag. But I was fascinated by all these reports of just people, and there were ads in the magazine for people to go off and fight this GPO box if you're interested in going and fighting in this particular Latin American country, or I've got a dirty job that needs to be done in an African country if you're interested, write me a letter here. And I just thought, how does this all sort of work? And I suppose that character of Congo Müller too, it also talks to the fact that we're only 20 and a bit years out of World War II, which when it ends leaves just a huge number of people, including a huge number of Nazis, with no discernible skills other than what they can then use being a mercenary. And Müller was one of those people, and there are hundreds of thousands of German soldiers who are left after World War II, and the ranks of various spy agencies and mercenary outfits are just absolutely full of them. There's a terrific book by an academic called Danny Auerbach. I'm just looking up at my bookshelf, called Fugitive, which chronicles what happened to all these Nazis after World War II. And they don't just disappear. They disappear, but they disappear into spy agencies. They go and work for the Egyptians. They work for the CIA, Mossad, the KGB, British intelligence. Africa is full of them. The Middle East is full of them. Congo Müller was one of those people. Yeah, real throwback to that sort of era.
Yeah, it was very fascinating watching The Laughing Man to see him mention, because the documentary is mostly just an interview with Müller. He mentions Mike Hoare during that interview a few times. And then he even mentions, I think it's Gualtiero Jacopetti, or it might be Franco Prosperi, one of the filmmakers behind this documentary called Africa Audio. He directed a lot of, these guys were behind a lot of the Mondo movies, and we even talked about him on our Mandingo episode because they also directed The Farewell Uncle Tom. And Africa Audio, also known as Africa Blood and Guts, it chronicles a lot of the shit that was going on in Africa at this time. It came out in 66. I want to say they were there in 64. And there were all these accusations of them staging stuff, because these were Mondo movies. Some of them were staged. Some of them were real life footage, including working with people to make sure that they could film the execution of some Simba soldiers. And they had to keep rescheduling so they could get a better day to shoot the footage as this person was being executed. So there was a lot of controversy around this film. But yeah, it was just amazing to see how all of these things tied together. Mad Mike Hoare's son wrote his biography. I was listening to an interview with him, and they're just all skirting around all of the atrocities that were happening. And thank God for things like Hanowski and his partner doing these documentaries, because it's, here's what was really going on. And I feel like we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this. And the other reason I'm concentrating on this is because the big difference between the book and the movie for me is in the book, it's a South African guy who's kind of the troublemaker of the group. And in here, they went for more of a realistic thing and brought in Henlein, who, rather than having an iron cross, they put a swastika on him, and that becomes a major thing in the film. And I kept wondering, like, why are you bringing this guy in? What's going on? But these mercenaries knew that you had to pair up with other people, whether they were distasteful or not. But I think Mad Mike Hoare and Müller really got along in real life.
Wouldn't surprise me at all. Mad Mike Hoare wrote, I think, 8 books about his various experiences as a mercenary, and was something, again, going back to that, and by no means glorifying this, but going back to that soldier of fortune period. He banged out a number of books which were in the newsagents, and then he was he was seen as something of a hero, I think, because he was an avowed Christian and an anti-communist, as well as probably what today we probably call potentially a war criminal. But he parlayed that he was a technical advisor on another great mercenary film called The Wild Geese, and the character of Richard Burton in The Wild Geese, I think, is also based on Mad Mike Hoare. And he would go on later to get into trouble, and I think he almost did jail time for planning a coup in the Seychelles, which is an island in the Indian Ocean. He was around, and I can the fact that I had heard of this guy, and I think I've got a couple of his paperbacks at home, and there would also be these weird instant books, what you need to know about mercenaries, stuff like that. The film's more than that too, isn't it? Because while you've got Curry, who is a sort of the mercenary who's doing the job for money, I suppose the moral center of the film is the character of Rufo, played by Jim Brown, who's a Congolese person who's gone to America and being educated and come back. And for him, it's not about, they talk about money. Curry says to him, we need to talk about money. Your cut, if we get these diamonds out, is such and such. And Rufo says, you keep it. I'm not doing it for money. I know for you it's money, but for me this is my country, and I'm trying to basically pull the thing out of the fire and make it work and save it, which is a great tension that they set up in the film. It's a bromance and a tension between the Curry character and the Rufo character. But you've also got that other triangle of the relationship, which, as you say, is this absolutely despicable Nazi character, Henlein, played by Karsten, who is as bad as you imagine he can be, and who you just know at the very beginning of the film when he finds out that they're going to get diamonds, and he says, oh, look, I'm coming along with you, because they put the train together, a great piece of logistics porn. At the beginning of the film, they put the train together and they get a sort of unit of Congolese soldiers, and Henlein says, I'm coming. I wouldn't miss it for the world, of course. And you just know he's going to fuck you over. He's coming for the diamonds, and you've got to watch this guy. He's a complete snake.
They do a really good job of setting up those tensions, of putting them there at the beginning of the thing, because Jim Brown, Rufo, and Curry, Rod Taylor, do have that really nice brief scene in the bar where they're just over a couple of beers, they're sketching, they're making little plans on a napkin of they've got to put this mission together really quick, and they're just, and you can tell they've got a real history, a real affection, a real bond, but there's also that split, that difference of motivations, and they bring it up right there, that what would happen if you were paid, I think Jim Brown says to Rod Taylor, what would happen if you were paid to fight against me? They agree, yeah, that's a real possibility that could happen, and I wouldn't like it, but we might find ourselves in that situation, and it really encapsulates a pretty thorny and interesting mix of tension to their relationship before throwing the Peter Karsten, the Henlein character in there, who they're obviously united in opposing. Yeah, so many nice little tricky moral and thematic complications are seeded into the beginning of the film and are going to pay off later.
It's funny, in the book, Ruffy, I believe, as opposed to Ruffo, Ruffy he's much more, I would say, comic relief almost. And so I listened to the book, I didn't read it. And the guy, when he's doing the voice of Ruffy, it's almost like a Rochester type of voice that he's doing. And it's interesting. It's interesting too, because I don't think he knows how to do a South African accent, because he makes the character of Henlein is Wally something. They have these very normal names like Wally, Keith, Bruce. For him, he makes him sound like Jason Statham for some reason. So I wasn't getting South African at all, much less German, but I think them changing him to a German character was really smart. I think he's undercut sometimes in the movie because he's being voiced by Paul Frees. So there are times where he literally sounds like Boris Badenov, especially when he gets angry and starts screaming.
What about soldiers the last few days? Ask your lunch guests if they've seen soldiers on trucks, maybe.
It's funny, we just talked about Some Like It Hot a few weeks ago, and I never knew that Paul Frees was doing the voice for Tony Curtis whenever Tony Curtis is in drag. And so now we have yet another film where a character is being dubbed over by Paul Frees. So more power to him. And I always love talking about Paul Frees. I talked about him a lot when we did the Rankin on Bass show, because he showed up in so many of those specials. But yeah, every once in a while, you'll really hear Boris Badenov when he starts yelling about stuff, especially when he and Yvette Mimieux are going at it later on in the film.
So Yvette Mimieux is in this film.
Really for no reason.
Well, she's sort of the romantic interest, isn't she? She's the romantic interest. Yeah.
But she's held over.
I'm not going to
from
complain, especially when she's wearing those white pants.
Yeah. Yeah, so the book, the character is much more important to Curry's. The main relationship in the movie is definitely Rod Taylor and Jim Brown, and that's the rich relationship to explore. In the book, we learn about the Curry character through the Yvette Mimieux character, and that's really why it is a romance. It is a pretty sweeping romance that is greatly leaned on in the book. That honestly, if you took her character out of the film, I don't know how much you'd lose, other than she's lovely and nice to have around, but is not near as important to the film as the character was to the book.
I'm not sure I think you're partly right about that, but her character doesn't do a lot. I'm certainly not going to disagree with that. One of the things I really like about this film is it just goes there. Everything, it goes to every bad place that possibly you think it's going to go to, and it does go to those places. They get strafed by a plane from their own side. There is an incredibly brutal chainsaw battle between Henlein and Curry, which Curry wins, and then he proceeds to put Heinlein's head on a train track in front of an oncoming train wheel, and Rufo has to pull him off and say, "No, we need this guy." There's that scene in Fort Reprieve, we can talk about that later, when they think they've got the diamonds, but they haven't got the diamonds. There's the scene where Henlein shoots those two little African kids because he thinks they're spies. So it goes to all those places, and I think Taylor is good as this sort of almost animalistically violent person, but there's a balance there. With Mimieux, you often think, oh, maybe he's not that bad. Maybe he's not going to go to that place. And I think she's there to bring some tension in terms of Curry's character development. You actually think, oh, Curry's mellowing a bit. He likes this woman, and maybe he's prepared to not be quite as much of a brutal bastard as he actually can be. But as things turn out, he does become that brutal bastard. So I think she does have that role is important in terms of adding some tension, I think, into the story.
I would never complain about having her.
No, absolutely.
It also helps make that relationship between Curry and Rufo less gay. It becomes this whole idea of, well, she's really the romantic interest, not Rufo, but really they both love Curry a lot, and I think Curry loves both of them a lot. It's interesting how they do a switch between the book and the movie as far as later on in the movie, at one point, Curry goes off, and that's when Rufo gets killed by Henlein. And Henlein also, during that portion, attacks Yvette Mimou, and in the book, he rapes her. I don't know I think he does kill Rufo, but as far as like the body being laid out when Curry comes back, it's more like her, and people are concerned about her and her attack, and her face is all bloodied and all this kind of stuff. Whereas in the movie, they switch it and it's Rufo who's laid out because he's been killed at that point. And Rufo becomes the now it's personal type of moment. We've already had some now it's personal type moments like those two little kids that get murdered. But yeah, when it's Rufo who gets murdered by Henlein, then it's okay, now I have to take care of this. Now, you mentioned animalistic, like he literally turns into an animal for a few seconds. There's a moment where he's like in front of a river and he like shakes his head. He looks like a dog or like somebody from the island of Dr. Moreau or something. So yeah, now it's really personal if you attack Rufo because he's my guy.
Yeah, I don't think Rufo is killed in the book. I think that was a big change for the film. But yeah, that murder of the kids is really like oh shit, we are in for it in this movie moment of the film. Yeah, they stop the train to, I forget what they're doing, getting some kind of minor repairs or water for the boiler. But yeah, these two little children are screaming off in the distance, and they come in. They're afraid of the soldiers. They think that the soldiers are going to kill them and eat them. But Jim Brown picks them up, holds them in his arms like a protective big brother, and gives them candy bars and talks to them all sweet. And it's this really touching little cute moment. And they set the kids down and send them on their way. Curry's, give them some food they can take back and have something to eat later. And it's a warm moment. And then you hear a little smattering of machine gun fire off screen, and Curry and Rufo go to investigate what happened. And you find Heinlein standing over the slaughtered children with blood puddles on the ground. And he's just calmly wiping down his gun and cleaning it, and there's no way I was going to let these kids go. They use these kids as spies. They're endangering the mission if we let them go. And it's such especially for films from the time, I think 50, 60 years later, watching this movie, we're conditioned not to think it's ever going to get that bad on screen. They're gonna threaten things, but yeah, as to Andrew's point, it goes there. It absolutely goes there in this movie, and it's a moment where it's early enough in the film. You're like, where else is this going? This would be the horrible climax, the crescendo of evil in most films if it ever got there, but they just tossed this off pretty early in the film, and it's really unsettling.
And Rufo is the moderating influence there, because Curry wants to kill Heinlein then and there after he orders those children, and Rufo says, you can't do it, we need him, the mission is more important, ends justifies the means, all that sort of stuff. And of course, when Rufo is killed later on, Heinlein kills Rufo because he thinks he has the diamonds, but he doesn't have the diamonds. Or any moderating, I suppose Claire's not that much of a moderating factor at the end, is she? Any kind of moderation on Curry completely goes. And I think you're right, Jed, it's okay. So they've already been strafed by their own side, so it's getting bad. But when those kids get killed, then there's the chainsaw fight. Then they get to Fort Reprieve, and they find, as you say, and I love that scene where the guy who's in charge of the Belgian community and the diamond trade in Fort Reprieve, they've got this massive safe underground with this wonderful B-movie time clock that's set for 3 hours, which gives them some time to have a bit more drama, a drama with another aspect of the story. But then they get the diamonds. They get on the train just as the Simbas are attacking. I think it's an incredibly well shot sort of action sequence, and they're on the train pulling away. The Simbas have got mortars and they're firing mortar shells at the train, and they cross the bridge and a mortar shell hits the coupling of the train that's carrying the majority of the civilians. And I still remember, I can remember this when I was a little boy watching this film with my parents, just absolutely mouth completely open at this scene when the train slowly slides back down the railway track towards Fort Reprieve, where, of course, the Simbas are waiting for them. And also, unbeknownst to Curry at that particular time, the diamonds are on that carriage as well, which means they have to go back into Fort Reprieve later that night and get the diamonds. But that scene of the train and the civilians on the train realizing, oh shit, and Curry and everyone else going, oh my God. And yeah, there's that terrible scene where the train rolls into Fort Reprieve, and of course the Simbas do terrible things. Actually, that's a much worse, from memory. I haven't read the book for quite some time, but that scene of what the Simbas do to the civilians, etc., after the train rolls back into Fort Reprieve is dealt with in the film, but Wilbur Smith, the book's author, really goes into excruciating amount of detail about that in the book.
Oh, yeah. They're talking about guys that are queuing up to rape these women, and they've had 4 and 5 times. They're back at the back of the line and waiting. Yeah, it's awful.
It's awful. It's and unnecessary. But as a piece of action, I just want to go back to the drama of that train sliding back. I just remember going, oh, my God, that's incredible. And again, it goes there.
It's the screams that get me. The screams of all those people and the screams that you still hear when they get back into Fort Reprieve later on, and you just know the worst things. It's bedlam. It's the worst nightmare you can imagine is the scene back at Fort Reprieve when they go back in to get those diamonds. Just the chaos, the screaming, the fires that are burning. It is just, yeah, it's total nightmare fuel.
It's vaguely surreal as well. But you've got that very haunting, low-pitched soundtrack, and everything's happening, all the terrible stuff is happening off character by and large. You can vaguely see an outline of it, but you can't really, and it's all misty, and it's quite, they've stumbled into hell, and of course. And
it's a great piece of screenwriting because, yeah, Smith's book, it just tells you what's happening there, and it's terrible. But the film creates a scene where Jim Brown decides his idea, they need to get in there and find the diamonds and set up a diversion, blow up a bunch of stuff from the inside. And in the book, they just wait until everybody's passed out and sneak in and blow things up. But in the film, they give Jim Brown the idea I'm going to pretend I belong here. Yeah, and he and Rod Taylor strip off their shirts, and he drapes Rod Taylor over his back like he's a dead body, a prize, a trophy. Yeah, and he carries them through this chaos, all the screaming, all the horrible violence. That one guy gets his like a fiery arrow put through his mouth, like right off screen. And there's like nuns being carried off in torn clothing, and there's just tons of just horrible stuff right out of view, where there's just this mass of bodies that, and it's lit so beautifully, so luridly as he's wading through there. And it's really a great decision on the part of the screenwriters and Cardiff and everybody involved in representing it visually. Great change, great little change that makes the scene better.
One thing I didn't really pick up on until I was listening to the book was the whole idea of the doctor character, Mike, in the book. Again, these guys have these normal names. Mike. And he used to be a drinker and he has been on the wagon for years. And I didn't get that when I was listening to it earlier. And then I was finally because I was mixing up the book and the movie, because the doctor character here, absolutely 100% drunk. First time that they meet up with him, they're drinking, and his price to go on this mission is 2 crates of this liquor, and which eventually Rod Taylor throws away, really pisses this guy off. It's more in the book of it. He's on the wagon until they get to Fort Reprieve, and then the Henlein character basically forces drink on this guy, and then he suddenly gets really super drunk. I think it works just as well to have him drunk the full time, because then his change when he does go to, so while they're waiting for that 3-hour time clock, that time lock on the safe to expire, that's when Henlein takes him in and they get drunk in this bar. And that's also when Taylor and Mamu go to a mission and they find that there's this woman there who is really pregnant. She's been in labor for 3 days. They need to get a doctor. So they come back, they sober this guy up. I did like in the book where he just like forces his fingers down the doctor's throat and he throws up all over his hand to try to sober him up. They don't have that in the movie, thank goodness, but they take him there. And when he's just complaining, what am I supposed to do? Da, 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 da. And he like puts his hand out, like, what do you want from me? And the woman grabs his hand. And I think that the guy who's playing the doctor, he just does such a good turn at that point. Like you see him struggling with this as far as I'm a drunk, but people actually need me. And that's his big moment, is when they are, okay, doc, baby's delivered, let's go. And he's just, no, I'm going to stay here. Like the baby needs help. These people need help. And it's basically, he knows, I think deep down, that it's a death sentence, because if the Simba find this mission, which they do, they're all dead. I don't even know if I think the baby's dead too. There's definitely some baby killing in the book. I think everybody's dead. And he just basically, finally, he's okay, I've come to my peace. This is what I need to be doing, is helping people, whether it costs me my life or not. It's a really poignant moment.
Chainsaw fights and killing children are one thing, Mike, but showing vomiting on screen, you can't do that.
You got to wait for John Waters to do that part. Yeah.
I read the book some time ago. I must admit, I didn't refamiliarize it. I didn't revisit it for this podcast because I didn't like it that much to want to read it again. So Wilbur Smith was a Rhodesian-born British South African novelist. I didn't think that Dark of the Sun was that good a book, but his books were everywhere. These sort of men's adventure sort of books. My father had, I think, the entire set on his bookshelf in his den, and you still find them in secondhand bookshops all over the place. That novel, Dark of the Sun, Smith's novel, that was actually banned in South Africa for 11 years because it was too violent and gritty for the South African censors. So you can imagine how hardcore it must have been if the apartheid government basically banned it.
Well, it doesn't help either that the Henlein character is South African in the book, and he's the biggest villain that you could come across.
But that doctor scene is great. And again, it adds another layer because it's interrogating the sort of the motivations about why all these people are here and what they're doing. And of course, later on, they get back to the mission where the Simbas have killed everyone, including the doctor. And Curry basically, it's a great scene. Curry basically says, look at him. That's what his morals got him. He got killed. He didn't get very far. And Rufo says, I think he did. And then Curry's got that great scene where I think he picks up a rifle and he says, look, the gun's Chinese, Rufo, paid for by Russian rubles. The steel probably came from a West German factory built by French francs. Then it was all flown on an African airline, probably subsidized by the United States. So it sort of the economics of global imperialism, we just slot that in there quickly. But it's a great sort of dramatic sort of scene. And that, as you say, that doctor suddenly realizing, I'm a doctor, I have to be a doctor, I'm not a drunk, even though I'm going to be killed.
It's nice. In the book, they just omit. At one point, Curry's, should I go back to the mission and see if everyone was killed there? No, I'm just going to pretend that everything is okay. I'm not going to even check. And he just kind of like says, no, I'm just going to think to myself that everyone is fine there and they never go back and find out. Here, having found out, I think actually makes a big difference.
Oh, Trump must have read this book when he started that war in Iran, yeah?
Well, Trump would have won Vietnam.
Well, I just wanted to inject one anti-Trump into the projection booth just to...
I mean, we can talk about how the promise of money to these mercenaries and the good pay and all that stuff. Basically, we have ICE is our own mercenary corps here in the United States. So the one character we haven't talked about is André Syrier, who's played by Olivier Despaux, I think is how you say his name. He is barely in the book. He's barely in the movie. There's a really just fascinating scene in the book where the Henlein character is talking about his feet and that he's got athlete's foot and it's coming back. And so he has this ointment and he gives the ointment to Andre and he's just, hey, put this ointment all over my feet, and is making him basically serve him. And they start talking about Andre's past and that Andre had lived with a man, I think in Belgium. And so he just like suddenly becomes this whole, oh, you're homosexual, you don't deserve to live, basically. And like his end in the book is also horrific because he's the guy with the diamonds who gets left behind. He's on that railway car that comes back into the fort. What the Simbas do to him is truly horrific. And of course, it's all humiliation and sexual humiliation. Basically, the general just like stomps on this guy's testicles and almost kills him. But then Andre gets his revenge by being the guy who like sets off a grenade and kills this general and kills the guys inside of this hut that they're in or house that they're in. And his last words are, still a man. It's like he's proving his manhood by killing all of these guys. And it's so fascinating to see just like the embrace of manliness when it comes to what Smith was doing and what a lot of these, I read up a lot on men's adventure stories and just seeing what the themes were and stuff. And just this whole, like, I'm not gay, I'm a man and I'm going to prove myself kind of thing. So it's like his redemptive moment for him being gay.
Yeah, there's a character like that. Not exactly like that, but there was a very gay character in Wild Geese who...
But he was a Benny Hill type character, wasn't he? He was like a sort of the Doctor.
Yeah, but he was like he was very out and made no bones about it, but was also very much part of the team there for the rough the rough stuff.
The rough trade.
The rough trade. Treated differently there, for sure.
It is fascinating to compare those two movies, just to see even Hardy Kruger in there as the German one, and that they saddled him with carrying around this African leader that they're trying to rescue, and all of the racial tension that's going on between those guys. I was just so fascinated / distracted by Richard Harris's glasses through that whole movie. I was like, can you find bigger glasses than the ones that you're wearing presently? I don't think that you can.
Hello, folks. Michael Caine here. You know, when people look at me, they often say, "Those are bloody large glasses, Michael." And I tell them, exactly. Michael Caine, bloody large glasses, new from Foxley. Believe you me, I know a thing or two about giant glasses. They're about power, aren't they? And they're about the bloody powerful blokes who wear them. I'm one of those bloody powerful blokes, aren't I?
Well, it's kind of a triumphant, isn't there, of the mercenary film. I think there's Dark of the Sun, there's Wild Geese in 1978, and then there's The Dogs of War in 1980. They are the three. So there's lots of other mercenary films. And, of course, the Italians did a whole wave of spaghetti mercenary films. I don't know what's done. They're not called spaghetti mercenary films, but I just labelled them that. But those three films are the core mercenary films, and they all have similar themes, don't they? And nod to that time when you could just get a copy of Soldier of Fortune and there'd be a PO box for someone wanting people to go to an unnamed African country to fight.
Were you tempted, Andrew?
Probably a bit young, I think. I did find the sort of ads fascinating, and they were also blended in with ads for like radio equipment and spy equipment and surveillance equipment. And you could buy iron crosses, you could buy bayonets, you could buy all that sort of stuff, which for a sort of 15-year-old boy in the sort of late 70s, that was all like, wow, how does this work?
Yeah, the Iron Cross thing. I think we mentioned this a little bit as far as Henlein wearing a swastika. So Müller did not wear a swastika, but he did. He wore an Iron Cross, and there was a swastika in the middle of it. And here they just remove all doubt and just make it a big old swastika. And I love that when they meet, when Curry meets Henlein, he's just, you got to take that off. And there's this very pointed, literal pointed moment of him just like pointing at that swastika, like, you got to take that off. And then after he murders those two kids, just put the swastika back on, just like you said, Jed. Put the swastika back on. You've earned it. The structure of this story is so smart when it comes to these different beats that they have, and each one is just leading to the next, to the next. That speech that Jim Brown gives about, yeah, we need this guy, and just him talking about my father and how his father had his teeth sharpened and stuff. And I went down this whole rabbit hole of looking up teeth sharpening stuff as far as what was that. In some tribes, they had teeth sharpening was more of a decorative thing. And then other tribes, it was we sharpen our teeth because we're cannibals. And I don't know which one Jim Brown's father was, but just Jim Brown being like, I didn't sharpen my teeth. Like, he's trying to be westernized. Like, he got educated in the West. He knows 4 languages they say at one point. So he's able to translate these things. He's able to understand the bastards at that bar at the beginning who are talking about him. Oh, you got yourself a big one. Those kind of things. And it's just, no, he's very educated, tries to distance himself from his father's generation. But at the same time, like you said, this is his war. Like, he is very invested. This is his country. He wants to see his country succeed. He wants to see probably even the leaders like the Calvin Lockhart character. He's the one who hires them to go over and get these diamonds. And with that white guy who's there with Calvin Lockhart, you're just like, okay, Calvin Lockhart looks like basically either like a Soviet or a U.S. stooge. Like, they're playing out the Cold War here in Africa. That's the whole thing, like you were saying before, Andrew, as far as this one was viewed as being backed by the Soviet Union. This leader was looked at like he was being backed by the U.S. So it's like a chess game that's happening with this freaking continent.
His teeth were found when he was 12 years old. And when he laughs now, he puts his hand over his mouth like this because he's ashamed. But when the time came, he wouldn't let them foul my teeth.
Still not getting to the point, are you?
I come from a tribe that used to believe, a lot of them still believe, that if you eat the heart and brain of your enemy, his strength and wisdom will be added to your own. Primitive, savage tribal beliefs based on ignorance, black dower. No different than Henlein's primitive, savage tribal beliefs. His teeth were fouled by his mom and papa. White dower.
His father protected him. That's a great. I mean, we're jumping back to the beginning, but that is a great set piece when you've got this really sleazy President Calvin Lockhart who's smooth and urbane, and there's this sweating fat Belgian banker. He's really the bad guy of the story in a lot of respects. The work along with Henlein, because of course the Belgians were the colonial power that ruled Congo for a long time and did some absolutely horrendous stuff. But yeah, it's a great and the way that banker says, of course, it's the people. It's the people. The diamonds don't matter. It's the people. He's sweaty suit. Yeah, pull the other one, mate. Can I ask, what do we think about this direction? Because it's pretty because he's best known as a sort of cinematographer, but he's really got he really hasn't. I think he did 15 films of nothing really amazing, but knocked it out of the park with this one a bit.
I think so. It's easily his best.
I love some of the direction in this. Just the putting together of the train scene and some of those shots of Jim Brown when he's got the smoke coming up from the smokestack, but then he's got some more smoke behind him. And I'm like, I don't even know if they shot this with a real train or not. Like, I know that they did, but there were certain insert shots where I'm just like, I don't know if this train was moving, what was going on, but it just looks so good. When I think back to this movie, I think about it being much more lurid in terms of color, but it's a great, great, beautiful, colorful film. These locations, and this is all shot in Jamaica, I believe, because they found a guy who had a steam train that was set up to go through Jamaica, and there's not that much as far as they do the smart movie thing as far as, okay, here's the station, we'll be back here later. Here's this bridge, we'll be back here later. Here's the town, we'll be back here later. So it's just like they keep moving from one to the other because they're just retracing their steps as they go back. The one thing I didn't necessarily understand from the movie is why they got so upset about the fuel truck being exploded. And that plays out a little bit more in the book as far as, okay, the train is kaput. We're going to have to now hoof it. They steal, at least in the book, they steal all of the general's jeeps and vehicles and stuff. And they're like, okay, we better have enough gas to get back to civilization. So that makes the big difference in the movie when they explode the truck. Yeah, those scenes like we were talking about of inside of Fort Reprieve, where it's just absolute bedlam. I don't think a slacker director is able to give you that tension. This tension in this movie, you could cut it with a knife. I did go back, Jed. You had recommended a film that Cardiff directed earlier in his career, which was absolutely bizarre. I did try to watch
Scent of Mystery.
What's it called? Smell of Fear? No, thank you. I was thinking of The Naked Gun. Scent of Mystery.
I read his book, Magic Hour, and I didn't know really anything about him before doing this. I looked into his filmography as a director first, and I was like, other than Girl on a Motorcycle, which came out the same year as Dark of the Sun, and talk about showing the difference, his range, hard to get very, very much different than those two films. I really was not familiar with his stuff, but I was a Philistine, didn't realize that he had been a very influential cinematographer working with the Archers on the Red Shoes and A Matter of Life and Death and Black Narcissus, and being very influential on film going forward and in the way things are shot and colors used and things like that. But yeah, his book, Magic Hour, was really fun, full of stories about tricks in filmmaking and things like that. But yeah, the bit about Scent of Mystery, it was a film made to be shown in, and I forget if they called it Smell-O-Vision or not, but Odorama, that might have been what it was. Was that John Waters' thing? But anyway, it was meant to be the next big evolution of cinema. Was you would go to, I guess, combat people watching television at home. And it was like, no, you come to the cinema because we've got scents interjected into your film. And there'd been a big demonstration of the tech by the person who developed it, and he was excited about it, and the producers were excited about it, and they put together this adventure film called Scent of Mystery. And by the time the film was ready to go, they had sold off the technology, sold off the company that was producing the smells. And the company was now they were not doing a good job. And like everything, all the smells ended up being pretty much the same and not really smelling like anything. And yeah, the movie was released and it was just an absolute disaster. Of course, when you've got scent in the title, all the reviews can be very savage about, yeah, it's a stinker, things like that. But the film exists now without the Smell-O-Vision. And it's really bizarre to watch because there are just these out of nowhere lingering shots on like baguettes or flowers or a woman putting perfume on or something like that. That it's a very surreal sort of film that for that reason. And I would say worth seeking out and checking out just for the experience and trying to imagine what it was like. Trying to imagine what the best version of this was in people. Why was that so exciting to Cardiff and the producers to be on the cutting edge of this technology that probably thankfully didn't go anywhere. But yeah, very strange film that he was a part of. A weird little footnote in cinema history.
If they'd done it Dark of the Sun, it just would have been sweat. Well, the swell of sweat. Everyone is always sweating so much, except
sweating and alcohol.
Yeah, except Yvette Mou, who never smells, who never looks like she's sweating at all, and even after she's nearly been killed by the Simbas, looks $1 million.
She's wearing those white pants, and I'm just like, how impractical. I don't know if this is after Labor Day or not. Let's hope not. But just those white pants, I'm just like, God, those things should be filthy by now. But even after she's like running and being pulled into train cars and all this stuff, pretty pristine.
Incredible shot of her in the jungle as they are waiting for Curry to come back from radioing to get gasoline dropped to them. It's just like people are just lying on the ground everywhere. It almost looks like carnage. Everyone's hot and miserable and passed out. And she's leaning, back against a tree stump, smoking a cigarette in these pristine white pants, and her shirt knotted all Ellie Mae at the navel. And God, what a fucking movie star. It's a pretty incredible shot.
And just so people don't yell at us, yes, we are aware that her name, Yvette Mimieux, inspired the, Emmanuel Mimieux from the Inglourious Bastards. Yes, we're aware of that. We're not talking about it. That's all.
Yeah.
We didn't say a thing.
She was an interesting character. I don't know if you guys saw many of her films. I had not seen many of her films before seeking them out for this, but I watched, she made in the late 60s and then 70s, as she was starting to age out of the ingenue roles, she actually wrote a couple films for herself to star in. She wrote a couple TV movies, and they're not bad. She did one called Hit Lady, where she plays an assassin who wants to retire, and it's television production and all, but it definitely capitalizes on her beauty. She wears 3 different amazing bikinis in the film and things like that. But a very cool little, surprisingly sturdy little crime movie made for TV. And she did one called Obsessive Love, where she plays a woman who's obsessed with a soap opera actor, is in love with him and delusional about his reciprocating her affections. And anyway, I thought that was cool. Good for her. Went out and wrote her own movies.
I saw her in The Time Machine. Mm-hmm. That was the film that she hasn't, in a sense, got a great... She plays one of those sort of childlike humans in the future being eaten by the Morlocks. That was, which of course Rod Taylor was also in. That was George Powell's The Time Machine. That was his breakout film. And I think I've seen her, I've seen the images for Hit Woman, or was it Hit Lady?
Hit Lady.
Hit Lady, of course, sorry. Yes, of course, Hit Lady. I think I saw her in Jackson County Jail with Tommy Lee Jones, a fairly hardcore sort of woman in Southern US prison film where, everything that happens in those films happens to her. Always had a weird ethereal presence, even in Jackson County Jail. She's has a really interesting sort of presence.
That was actually spun off into a TV show, which is wild to think about. It didn't really go anywhere. I think it just had a pilot episode, but I don't think she was involved with it, but the director Michael Müller was, and it's a movie I'd seen. I don't know how. I wouldn't have guessed that film was one that somebody wanted to spin off into a television show. It must have made a bigger splash than I was thinking it had. I knew her from the Black Hole, the Disney film. That was
I have never
that was
seen.
one I
I've never
enjoyed. It is a weird movie. I watched it again and I will say it's obviously a different thing seeing it now than seeing it as a kid when it was new, and I was eating up anything that kind of looked like or sounded like Star Wars at the time. I was a sucker for. There was a lot of kind of nostalgic pleasure in seeing that stuff, but it's a weird movie that I think deserves to survive on its own strange merits.
We haven't really talked about Rod Taylor and what a man of action Rod Taylor is. I know that he worked with Cardiff a few times. What was the name of that movie that they did? The
Young Cassidy?
The Liquidator.
Oh, The Liquidator, yeah.
Sort of the spy, vaguely almost a Euro spy sort of comedy film. I think they were very big. Look, I'm a big Rod Taylor fan. And Sydney boy, I think he was a working class Sydney boy made good in Hollywood. At one point in the 1960s, I think he was mooted to play James Bond, but I think I've just about seen that just about every single major male actor in the 1960s. So Dark of the Sun was 67, and he was a boozer. I don't think he was he was a big boozer and a bit of a brawler. And as I think maybe you or Mike, you alluded to, he had an ego that was commensurate with the size of his stardom at the time. And you can tell, and it actually works to the film's advantage. He's starting to lose his youthful, boyish Australian good looks by the time he does Dark of the Sun, and he's looking a little bit alcohol sodden and puffy and a bit. The miles are starting to show on his face, which I think is a good thing. And I feel like he aged out very quickly. He did another mercenary film in 1968 called The Hell with Heroes by Joseph Sargent, which I've never managed to track down a copy of it. And then he did Travis McGee in Darker. He was a good Travis McGee, I thought, in Darker and Amber in 1970, but didn't do a whole lot after Dark of the Sun. It was sort of a bit of a slow downward slope. I get the sense. I had that role as Zabriskie Point. When was that? When was Zabriskie Point?
Had to be right around this time, I think. 70, was it?
Yeah, it's a small role. I think definitely Dark of the Sun is the peak of his acting career. I would films. There's been more famous films, like he was in The Birds and he was in, as we said, The Time Machine. But Dark of the Sun is his best acting work, I think.
And I absolutely love Jim Brown in this movie. He's like coming directly from the Dirty Dozen to this one. He's great. I love him when I see him in things. Obviously, The Running Man, or like I said, the Dirty Dozen. I really enjoy a lot of the blaxploitation films that he did, but unfortunately, I guess he didn't like working on this. There was an interview that he gave with Roger Ebert where he was just like, he canceled his plans to support the film. He said, I just didn't like the movie. It's the only film I've ever done that I didn't like. If I'd come here to Chicago and some guy had said, I don't like your flick at all, how could I disagree with him? If you put yourself on the line, you have to be able to believe what you say. But if you know the movie is no good, you have to say it is, and that eats you up.
What didn't he like about it? I know it says it in that article. I can't remember what it was, though.
He said, when I read the script, I thought it was going to be a political movie, and I thought we might even have a hassle, but the director simplified it to brutality and bad taste.
Oh, Jim, come on, Jim.
Those certainly a strong opinion given there by him. And I'd heard that before, but I was a little heartened to see that interview was from like right when the movie's coming out. It was from the 60s, and he'd only been in a handful of movies at the time. And I would be curious down the line what he thought. working in movies for a few decades, nearer the end of his career, what did he think of it? Because obviously, a lot of actors get, and a lot of people working in films are disillusioned by experiences on it didn't turn out the way I thought, and walk away from careers or make hard decisions about their careers based on those disappointments. I'd be curious what he'd thought later on, because I certainly think it's quite a good film, and I think he is very good in it. I think he is such a magnetic personality. Mike and I recently were talking about Parker movies based on the Richard Stark books, and he had starred in The Split as McLean, the Parker stand-in for that. And I gotta say, I don't think that's a good Parker adaptation. I think the movie is good. It's just the movie's enjoyable enough, but it's not great as an adaptation of the book. But man, he is just a real movie star, especially in those early films.
Yeah, and after he dies in the movie, you really feel the loss, because it's interesting they replace him with another guy, because really he is the conscience for Rod Taylor. It's Yvette Mimieux, but it's mostly Jim Brown, and he's the one that repeatedly is, no, you can't kill Henlein, we need him. He basically stops him after Henlein kills the two little kids. He also stops Taylor when Taylor and the chainsaw fight, which is, yes, such a incredible set piece, that chainsaw fight. And like you said, he's got his head on Henlein's head on the tracks, and he just signals to the guy who's driving the train, just like, okay, I guess I'd be a conductor. Okay, let's go. Time to move the train. And yeah, Jim Brown in that kind of odd slow motion shot is the one that pulls him up and is just like, no, you can't do this. Once he's killed by Henlein, hoisted on his own petard, then it becomes, all right, you and me, Katinga, we're going to track this guy down. We're going to make sure that Henlein pays. And Katinga becomes this kind of conscious figure. And he's the one that's just, after Curry brutally murders Henlein, even though you don't see it, very smart. Just the idea of this blood in the water, which that you then learn is him washing his hands, Curry washing his hands. It's, I'm not going to follow you. You cross the line. I'm not going to be able to support you at all. Sorry about that. And that's when eventually, like a few minutes later, it becomes, okay, I'm going to turn myself in. I'm going to go up for court-martial. And that's Taylor, basically, or Curry, I should say, saying, okay, I have gone too far. I have crossed the line. I do need to pay for my crimes. And this is what I'm going to do. And that's when Katinga gives him the final salute. And you don't need to salute me, because he's at that point no longer Captain Curry, because he's, going to be going to trial. And he's like, no, you earned this, basically. It's such a nice moment to this. And I think I didn't realize that Katinga is there throughout the rest of the movie. You see a few shots of him, but he is so backgrounded until Jim Brown is dead. And it almost is, we'll just swap out the black guy kind of thing.
And Brown was really on a roll in the late 60s. I was just looking at his filmography. I mean, I think the same year, I think the year after this film, he did Ice Station Zebra. And there was that cracker. I know he didn't like. I'm not sure if he liked it or not, but I'm a big fan of 100 Rifles.
Yeah, he didn't like working with Raquel Welch, I think. That was hard, but
a lot of people there that I think would be in that boat. He also did this. Have you guys seen this weird film he did called Kenner? Kenner, where he basically is going to India. He's a merchant marine, and he goes to India to go and track down someone who's killed a friend of his, and he ends up befriending this little Indian boy. It's shot in New Delhi. Kind of very weird, sort of, I don't know what. So he's in a blockbuster like Ice Station Zebra, and then the same year he's in this sort of quite strange film called Kenner, which is fascinating because it's all shot on location in New Delhi. So it's a nice little film, but he did a lot of stuff. Didn't do particularly a lot of political stuff, I might add, apropos of his comments to...
I don't know. Three the Hard Way is pretty political.
Well, I mean, there's politics. I think he was talking about capital P politics. We all know that all movies have a political subtext and politics can be read into them.
A lot of the people that review this podcast don't think that there are politics in movies at all.
I know. I don't know what...
Just shut your mouth and quit talking bad about Daddy.
I know you do get that a lot, and I do my best to try and actually encourage that. But I think there's obviously other people who are doing that as well, which is good to see. Yeah, great movie podcast, shame about the politics. That should be your next projection booth T-shirt. Great movie podcast, shame about the politics.
Keep your stupid comments in your pocket. So yeah, I did watch The Wild Geese. Not nearly as good as this.
No, not as well, and also in a small P as opposed to a capital P way. It does interrogate the politics of imperial intervention in Africa and being a mercenary, but not nearly as much as this kind of film does, and not with the sort of consciousness that this sort of film does. Yeah, Wild Geese, strain. I loved it. My father took me to see my Wild Geese as a boy, and I thought it was fantastic because of many aspects of it. And it also has a great scene. Possibly the one thing that Dark of the Sun lacks is a scene where they're all recruiting the mercenaries. I do like a good mercenary recruitment scene. Is always or they're recruiting the men for the mission. But yeah, Wild Geese, a strange, very British sort of film.
I almost couldn't make it through the opening credits. That song, oh my God, the theme from Wild Geese. Oh, that was wretched to me. I was just like, why are you caterwauling? I don't understand this. But no, the score for this one, super solid. Really enjoyed the music of this. And yeah, to go back to your earlier question, the direction by Cardiff, I think, is really well done. I was curious to see more of his stuff, but now after I've seen, what was the other name for Scent of Mystery? I think it was Holiday in Spain.
Holiday in Spain, yeah.
Yeah, tracked it down under that title, and I was like, yeah, this is rough, man. I felt so bad seeing Peter Lorre because it was just like final days of Peter Lorre.
Yeah, he had a heart attack on that film, and they finished it with body doubles and things like that. So,
going back to the whole idea of this being a heist film and a war movie, it's funny to compare this to like a Kelly's Heroes and to have like the Nazi in that, but the Nazi is so later on in the movie, and the whole idea of we're going to use this guy to help us with our tanks and all that kind of stuff. It's this whole like looting and war is okay kind of thing. Monuments Men, those kind of movies where it's just like, all right, yeah, we're protecting the gold, or we're protecting the stuff, or we need to just steal the stuff outright. I know you're a fan of Three Kings, Jedidiah, because it's been a while since I've seen that one, but I remember liking it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I revisited it recently preparing for this, and I liked it a lot when it came out, but I was expecting it to have diminished, I think, because of David Russell and things I know about him now. But no, I think Three Kings is a really great blockbuster movie for just but yeah, I do love the combination of a heist movie or a crime movie within a war movie. Ronin kind of fits into this subgenre with international espionage and mercenaries, and it's very much a heist film too. But yeah, pretty special little subgenre that's right up my alley.
The film that if I ever got a chance to program a double feature with Dark of the Sun, the film that I would really push is Andrew Detoff's Play Dirty. It's not a heist film, but is strongly in that genre of films where war, basically, and I think one of the characters, the commanding officer in Play Dirty, it's basically set in North Africa. Nigel Davenport is not the commander, but he actually is the commander, and then Michael Caine, and they basically have to go behind enemy lines, I think, and blow up a fuel dump, and then at a certain point, the British High Command decide that actually we need that fuel, but there's no way of contacting the group of men that we've sent to go and blow it up. So I think at one point of that they just suggest betraying them to the Germans or something like that. But Play Dirty it's a great film about war as a criminal enterprise and all the terrible things that accompany that. But it's also, and it's another film like Dark of the Sun, which goes there, consistently goes there in places that you wouldn't think it would go. It goes.
When you're talking about an André Dutoff film, I tend to get a little disappointed when I find out it's in color rather than black and white, because he made such striking looking black and white films, and some of the early color stuff is a little flat. But Play Dirty is a beautiful color production, and it's worth noting that the cinematographer on the film, Edward Scaife, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but he was the cinematographer on Dark of the Sun and on the Dirty Dozen. So 67 Dirty Dozen, 68 Dark of the Sun, 69 Play Dirty. That's a great little run there of top of the line men on a mission movies. And he shot the Oliver Reed movie Sitting Target, and he shot the absolute fuck out of that movie. It's really stylish and beautiful and very that's a movie I'd love to talk to you about, Mike, if you want to do an episode on Sitting Target sometime, if you haven't covered that. Yeah,
I'll put it down for next year and we'll come back, and this time I'll remember to hit the record button. It's always good to have a dry run a few weeks early.
Rehearsed in front of a live studio audience. That's right.
All right, we're going to take a break and play a preview for next week's show right after these brief messages.
Matt from Viva again.
And Emily, looking for something superior to streaming? A place with more than 10 times the selection available on literally all of the streaming services combined?
Check out Scarecrow Video's rent-by-mail service. Select from an unparalleled collection of over 155,000 films and get Blu-rays, 4Ks, and DVDs delivered directly to your door.
Get in on it now at scarecrowvideo.org and rediscover the wonders of physical media.
November 5th, 1877, San Marcos, California. Something is coming.
What was that?
Something frightening. Something appealing.
Take off your clothes.
Something from 105 years in the future.
This is a man. He is not the devil.
Time Rider, the adventure of Lyle Swan. A man who found his future in the past. Rated PG.
That's right, we'll be back next week with a look at Time Rider, the adventures of Lyle Swan. Until then, I want to thank my co-hosts, Andrew and Jedidiah. Jedidiah, what's been going on with you, sir?
Getting a few gigs on DVD releases or Blu-ray releases that you can check out. Mike and I did commentary on Arrow's new edition of The Outfit, John Flynn's The Outfit. Very excited for that. I don't know if that'll be out by the time this episode comes out, but coming soon, coming this summer. Looks like a real murderer's row of people involved with that one that somehow includes us.
Thanks again for the invite for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was good. Good thing.
And Andrew, how about yourself?
Working on a new book, new nonfiction book, and plugging away on trying to get a novel out there, which I'm making slow but steady progress, Val.
Is it about an Australian who's living in Berlin?
No, it's got no Berlin content at all.
Is it another Chance novel?
No, it's something completely different. It's an historical noir set in Melbourne in 1969. Let's just say that.
Thanks again, guys, for being on the show. Thanks to everybody for listening. If you want to hear more of me shooting off my mouth, check out some of the other shows that I work on. They are all available at weirdingwaymedia.com. Thanks especially to our Patreon community. If you want to join the community, visit patreon.com/projectionbooth. Every donation we get helps the projection booth take over the world.